This episode is sponsored by Hero Schedule. If your department needs better scheduling software that isn't outdated, clunky, and expensive, Hero Schedule is an easy switch. It's $4 per user per month, and they give you a free 30-day trial. Get started at heroschedule.com and click on Try Hero Schedule. Law enforcement and government agencies struggle with parking citations, often because no one will pay them. Boots or other devices are costly, and they invite confrontation when implied and later removed by enforcing employees. With Tire Tag, you can avoid many hurdles and ultimately promote public safety and revenue collection. To learn more, visit tiretag.com.
Cops are some of the toughest people to train because they're skeptical. They just want us to focus on, can we do it? Can we shoot this guy? Yes or no, right? You know, at the end of the day, that is really good policing when you just think about an optimal outcome, not just a lawful one.
You know, what is your legal standing? Like, what is the thing you're trying to do? And how do we make sure that all this effort, all the danger we may put ourselves in to get this effect, that it actually sticks? Like, we actually get to hold somebody. We actually get to get them all the way to trial and then see through the trial. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Blue Grit Radio. This is your host, Eric. Today I'm joined by Anthony by Blue to Gold. Anthony, thanks so much for coming on.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, as we recognize, we are recording on Super Bowl Sunday in the AM. That's how much we care.
We got to get it out of the way before the game starts. But that's our dedication to law enforcement, is that we got together. The only day we can get together is a few hours before Super Bowl.
Yeah, two super busy guys, a lot of projects, a lot of professional endeavors. So yeah, we're just going to jump into it. So those that don't know Blue to Gold, could you please introduce yourself, your background, and what brought you to this point where you created Blue to Gold and you're training up cops in legal matters so that their cases actually go somewhere, and that's like the end result that we want.
That is exactly right. We're our end goal is to make good case law. But the first thing I want to do is apologize because I feel inferior. Your background is so nice, and mine is blank.
No, you're good.
And mine, I'm actually moving, so I took all my stuff off the wall. I put up a few guns here just to have some, content here that people can look at. But
so people have been clowning me for a long time for having a blank wall before I moved, after I moved, and then just because I hadn't gotten around to it, and I just didn't take the time. So here we are.
So I was a trooper in Las Vegas. I spent most of my career as a sergeant. And I got to tell you, like I did, I didn't know. Ignorance is bliss, right? You know, you don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
But I was making a lot of, legal mistakes that I didn't really realize I was making until later in my career. Things involving being in backyards just for officer safety. You're a commander. You understand. You've been through these issues. We do things, and I was looking for some training out there, and I got to tell you, like. A lot of cops when they want to be a trainer, they don't want to train legal stuff. Either A, they don't feel competent in it, or it's just kind of boring. I like to say you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a bunch of running and gunning instructors. They want to teach SWAT, they want to teach tackle and grapple, but they don't want to teach the legal stuff. And so the legal training has really fell on the shoulders of our prosecutors and maybe some people in the community like some civil rights attorneys will come in and so forth, but they don't want to, even our prosecutors, surprisingly, maybe, your non-law enforcement audience, they don't want to teach cops either. Either A, that's not what they do. B, they're very busy. And C, cops are some of the toughest people to train because they're skeptical, right? You got to go in there with your A game. They're judging you. And if you can't I like to say, if you can't speak cop, and I don't mean that in like we have this code. It's that they have their own experiences and so forth. So what I started doing is I started really diving into the law. And, I started when I was in college. I went to Harvard University, which is a really huge honor.
Yeah, we
have
heard of it. Yeah. Good for you.
Well, Harvard Community College in Detroit. So
still good.
Wouldn't that be funny though? If I
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
"Hey, I went to Harvard," it's like Harvard Community College
I
and
mean, how
somewhere in
many
Detroit.
people would? Yeah, how many people would go for it? Like, instant
Uh,
credibility.
Instant credibility, and then when they see the degree on the wall, it's like, size of a postage stamp. And so I just, and I took all the classes I could that were somehow law related. I couldn't find that many because I wasn't it wasn't like a legal studies degree. It was
Hmm.
political science and government. But I also had the opportunity to study under a law professor for my master's at Harvard as well. And I wrote a book called Cops and Cameras. It's basically trying to explain the implications of body worn cameras. Like, this is many, many years ago. I don't think the book, if anybody has that book, it's quite outdated. But the point was, I did everything I could to get my mind around, based on legal training and so forth. And then I was, working. I just said, you know what? I went to the wife and I said, man, I really want to chase this dream. Like, I want to be a full time legal instructor. I can't do it part time. My little side hustle. I was like going to Utah and Idaho and California and getting these gigs and
Hmm.
but to do it right, you got to have a law degree. You got to be a lawyer for the credibility and just for the knowledge as well. So I retired early after 12 years. That was a big risk. I
Yeah.
was also single income, so my wife was like, "You better be rolling the
Mm.
dice, right here."
Hmm.
And so I applied to a few law schools that would work for me, geographically and so forth. I didn't want to go to Vegas. I wanted out of Vegas, so I applied to Gonzaga. One of the schools I applied to was Gonzaga,
There you go.
which is in Spokane,
Hmm.
which is you're a
Yeah,
Washingtonian.
Washington State. That's right.
I'm sorry, and
We make do. No
we
victims
make
here.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, we make do. It's and I got to tell you, like Gonzaga was very good to me. They gave me a lot of free money, thankfully, because it really helped financially. And so I did that. I was full time, and then basically like the day after I took the bar exam, I've been on the road practically every single week teaching cops.
Wow.
So that's kind of like the backstory. Blue to Gold has really blown up.
Yeah.
We're still a small company, which is actually what we don't want to be taken over by some huge other company. I've kind of had offers, from other bigger, private equity firms. They're like, hey,
Sure.
we're looking to gobble up some companies in your space. I'm like, nah, it would just change everything about us. We
Yeah.
love how scrappy we are. We're just we do whatever it takes for the customer, for the client, for the officer. So that's like a long version, probably, to your question.
No, I actually love it. I love it because it covered exactly what I wanted, but then more that is like the bonus material that I want to focus in on. And so just to rewind a little bit, I love the call to purpose, right? Like you recognize
Yeah,
this need, and that's a lot of why I want to highlight you, and we're gonna get to that. Whereas, you know, uh, there's no kickback here, and my agency did bring you in completely independent of me, right? Like I found your page, your company's page, and kind of what you're putting out, and I was like, man, we need more of this. This is good stuff. And then I hear like all, my colleague over on this end of things just saying, hey, I'm looking at bringing in more legal training because, to your point, cops like doing the fun stuff, which is
yeah,
absolutely freaking necessary. And what brought me into my agency when I was a new guy and I had the liberty to choose, like I really loved that real culture of like accountability to safety and tactics and like taking ownership of that. We've had a really robust, firearms and DT for years and years and years. But then it's like, we got one of my colleagues that comes from a strong investigative background just saying, hey, like, ultimately, what's it for? It's for when it all goes to court. Like,
yeah,
what is your legal standing? Like, what is the thing you're trying to do? And how do we make sure that all this effort, all the danger we may put ourselves in to get this effect, that it actually sticks? Like, we actually get to hold somebody, we actually get to get them all the way to trial and then see through the trial. Like, give the prosecution what they want, what they have, so
yeah,
they actually have a lot to work off of. So that piece, I'm glad we hit on the cultural competency, which is so relevant because whether it's MHPs that understand the culture, it's just different. You kind of alluded to that, right? Like speaking the same language. And then,
yeah,
lastly, I really love the point where you recognize this risk of doing what you really care about, but it's so foundational to your call to service in law enforcement, and then spinning off of that, because so many of us, recognize that there's so much of a tough transition, whether you do 30 years or whether you do 15, to
Yeah.
leave and go do something different, which I love the example because you didn't just fully jump. You started going to school, you started doing some trainings, you started wrapping your head around it because there is always something that people can do to kind of figure that whole thing out.
Yeah. Uh, one of the things too is you mentioned, just because you're into wellness and so forth,
Yeah.
and a lot of agencies are like LVMPD, right? I do a lot of work with Las Vegas Metro, and the new sheriff there, McMahill, is really into wellness. He really understands that this job is hard on the soul. It really is. I mean, it's you got to be. You have to have a really good mental health to to survive this career, and more importantly, maybe just survive retirement, right? I mean, being happy, physically and also mentally. But I look at this career and I look at this profession, my beloved profession, as I say, because I just absolutely love law enforcement. It is everything about it. I love the people. I love its mission. But we have, as a profession, we have spent literally billions and billions of dollars on use of force training over the last few decades,
Hmm.
and it's always like, it seems like that's the shooting part, and it's like, yes, it is the high liability stuff. You take a life, it better be reasonable, necessary, all these rules. But what about the call for service for shoplifting, and what about the call for service? Like, what are the rules of engagement there? Do we put enough training? I'm not saying that we need to go to a week long school for for our shoplifting. I'm just saying that a lot of cops, they're insecure about really what the rules are when it
Yeah.
comes to and I and Eric, I'll tell you, like with the cops and camera stuff, one of the things that I believe that cops freak out so much when they're being recorded, because you've seen this, right? They
Hmm.
just don't like to be recorded.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but yet we record everybody else with our body cam. We don't have a problem doing onto you, but we don't want it to be done onto us. And one of the reasons I'm telling you, one of the reasons is because I think the cop is thinking to him or herself, you know what? When you record me, you're going to catch my mistakes. You're going to catch me. You're going to criticize me. You're going to put this
Hmm.
on YouTube, and people are going to see maybe I didn't do something, and they have a lack of confidence in some ways, and they don't want to be nitpicked. And who does, right?
Hmm.
But I mean, when doctors and lawyers are out there, when they're filmed, or people are shoulder surfing their work, a lot of them that are good at their job, like, yeah, look at what I do. I'm awesome, and that's what the cop needs. The cop needs to be like,
That's right.
I want people to see me on this call for service, because it's going to have an optimal outcome. Doesn't mean it's going to have the greatest outcome, but have an optimal outcome, and make good case law, right?
Yeah.
And so and I can talk more about that too, just kind of my principles here,
Hmm.
about how I help cops make good case law. But that's really what it's about. Just make good case law, have competence, and also be proficient.
Yeah, that's such a good point because especially before body cams, yeah, a cell phone camera comes out or like an
Yep.
actual like older school camera and we clam up like we're going to act different. It's like, well, no, we should always assume. I love this, because when I
Yep.
started, one of my FTOs said, "You are driving around in a black and white fishbowl. Everyone
Yep.
is staring at you. They're looking in the glass. They almost want to go up and tap it, but they're looking. So if you're going to pick your nose, if you're going to, MF someone like under your breath, like they're watching you move your
Oh
lips and
yeah.
they're gonna watch you say, MF, right? So just that a level of awareness. He's like, assume you're always being watched. And I love that he said, even, going on 20 years ago, like closer to 20 than anything else right now. But he said, like, just assume that every interaction you have is gonna be viewed by your mom, by your grandma.
Yep.
And easier said than done and easy to forget in the intensity of the moment and emotions high and all that. But it is true, right? And so even in this body cam era, you do see more people, they clam up when there's, I mean, the worst of them is auditors, right? Intentionally trying to
They
get
intentionally,
you,
yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
the irony is, you're right. You can see a literal change in it in body posture, right? Maybe people like their shoulders come up, they're kind of
Right.
on guard, they're tense and they're rigid, and they almost go into robot mode, which we know can oftentimes, it's like when we're worried about it, we almost paint ourselves into narrower corners with what we're saying rather than just being like, hey man, like I'm trying to figure it out. I'm actually getting with my boss because the last thing I want to do is infringe on your rights.
Yep.
But just be cool with me. I'll be cool with you, right? Like if you had that kind of demeanor on a lot of things, whether it was an auditor or
Yeah.
just a generic person that was trying to scrutinize you, like I think that we'd be lot better off. And that goes absolutely back just to knowing where you're at, which is what you alluded to, like knowing what legal grounds you have, what your legal authority, which we do so much better of a job now than certainly when I started, right? Because
Oh yeah.
I'll say so many times being a young cop, you're going this way, you're going that way, you're doing this action. And sometimes, luckily, we were like, wait, what are we doing here? What's our goal? What
Yeah.
if this goes bad? And then the Sarge would absolutely be like, yeah, get out of there. What are you doing? Right. And
And right.
yeah, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of story time, but yeah.
Yeah, it's. I like to say, look, when I started law enforcement, I wish this wasn't true, but it was true. I was very immature,
Me too. Yeah.
immature in the sense that I didn't really appreciate the power that I had, and immaturity of just not using good discretion. Sometimes, we call it trooperizing people. People. We maybe there was no quotas, but there was kind of an unspoken quota, and the guy who wrote the most tickets got the fast car, and so
Yeah.
but then a lot of people, like, then you start thinking, really in the big scheme of things, there were some there were some enforcement actions I took that really, like, to expire registration. At the end of the day, it's a tax revenue issue, right? I mean, these are not bad people necessarily. In fact, it might be
Yeah.
the opposite. They're good people just trying
Yeah.
to get by, and but they have the insurance, they have the license, they just don't have the registration. But the point is, I just wish I was more mature about things. I wish that when I first started, it took me a few years, but that I didn't take things personal, and that's what you're kind of talking about. That's what these first amendment auditors, they really try to get into your skin, but this is also part of the law. Like, the law requires police officers to just, you can't disturb your peace, right? You've heard of that saying before. You cannot disturb a police officer's peace. Well, my peace has definitely been disturbed many times by some
Yeah.
people,
It's called going to
but
work. Yeah.
it's called going to work, and I'm a human being too. But the point is, just maturely think about the relationship here. You are the government, and you are having this enforcement action or consensual encounter with a civilian, and they can act pretty much any way they want within bounds. They can say whatever they want, certainly, for the most part, and you just can't take it personal. And I tell you, if I was working today, not today. It took me a few years, but after a few years, I had this amazing ability to just not take any of this personal. And
Mm.
once that, Eric, like, once that switch flipped for me, I thought I was an amazing cop. And I really, I made such good decisions. I was also able to talk to people, gang members, tatted up on their face, hardcore. That's the retirement plan, is to really, and I don't respect their lifestyle, because they were, the reason I was contacting them because they were committing crimes. But I just had this ability just to talk, because I just was a very, like, I didn't take anything personal, and
Yeah.
I showed people respect, and my mental health was a lot better because I didn't have any of this residual stress. I just went home, and I was like, I did good work today, and I looked good on camera, and if it looks good, if it sounds good, then usually it's part of the de-escalation stuff. So yeah, it's a whole different world. But that's what I want to see from cops. Just be mature in a sense. Don't take this up personal, and do good work. Like, use good discretion.
Yeah, I'll absolutely echo that. And a lot of that when I started was absolutely taking everything personally. And it
Yeah.
wasn't just my ego, but it was tying my ego to like the respect of the badge and the respect of the profession, and feeling like I needed to represent and even defend it at times. And that could be very precarious, right? When if you actually just distance yourself a little bit, recognize, hey, they're looking at the uniform, they're looking at the system. If they're really mad, they're looking at all those things rather than you, Eric,
Oh,
or
right.
you,
They
Anthony,
don't know
right?
you.
No,
Right.
yeah, and they're going to pick apart things that they can observe about you, whether it's your
Mm-hmm.
race and what you look like, your face, all
Yep.
these things, and that's where again it can get a little precarious if you don't take a step back and realize what it is you're doing and what's the end goal. The end goal is to get through the situation as peacefully as practical, right? And
Yep.
oftentimes that can include more patience, more respect, de-escalation, explaining what you're doing, like educating on the law, right? And not just
Right.
talking at people, which is something I've talked about before in reflection. But yeah, I absolutely echo you where it's still tough at times, especially when somebody's doing something to one of my guys, right? Because I'm at a desk most of the time. So I do take that personally, but it's still trying to keep that in check and recognize, hey, like it's not the individuals here. But yeah, oftentimes that was something I had to grapple with head on.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I can tell you, like, when I look at, how people treat officers and so forth, you kind of mentioned, look, I don't like it. But also what I don't like more is when officers are treating the public bad.
Yeah, me too.
Because my expectations of the public are pretty low to begin with.
Mhm.
But my expectations of police officers, it can't be any higher. We
Yeah.
are talking about the government. And also I tell when I'm in my classroom, I said, you know what? Who also doesn't want their rights violated? Me.
Mhm.
You know, um,
Everybody. Yeah. Cops too,
you know,
right? Like how often you see that
yeah.
with like just workplace practices and all that.
hmm Yeah. So we want officers. And another thing is, I do have sincere concerns about where society is at into that too.
Sure, yeah.
I, I think things are going to get better. I do look at history, and I certainly wouldn't want to be living in the Middle Ages.
Mhm.
Um, so I things are getting better. There are some nostalgic times when I watch Back to the Future. I think to myself, man, that's a kind of a cool time. Everybody seems kind of happy, and family
Just
seems cohesive.
skateboarding, yeah, yeah.
Skateboarding around, and just Biff. I mean, how scary is a guy named Biff? So, street monikers have gotten more scary. if that's a metric about where society is, street monikers have definitely got more scary.
They do and they don't, because then there's like the little, like you said, Scrappy, like Blue to Gold being Scrappy. I'm like, well, there's little Scrappy and there's little,
Yeah, little Scrappy.
yeah.
Scrappy doesn't. He got the bad name. He was last in line when they were handing out monikers. But the point is like I do have these concerns, and then I say to myself, you know what? The way to fix it is not to thump on people, is not to be more hard ass. It's not to be, more talk down to people. The way to fix this is to actually be an ideal police, that ideal scene, which is, hey, don't take it personal, be professional, still make good discretion, good decisions. I constantly, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because one more thing I'll just throw in here is that, look, we got to be honest as to, like, law enforcement is not a perfect profession. We have made mistakes. I'm talking like big mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
There are people sitting in prison that they're there because an officer planted evidence. In fact, there is I'm not going to name names, but there is an agency right now that is on the hook for over $30 million for a wrongful conviction because of a bad actor. And you look at the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. We have our career, our profession is not unblemished, but neither is doctors. Okay,
Right.
I think the number is like 600,000 people worldwide die from malpractice. But the point is, I don't know if that number is accurate. I think that's what I remember seeing. But the point is, we have to also take ownership of our beloved profession. We have made mistakes in the past, and I'm not talking about small mistakes. I'm talking about major mistakes, and we have to, quote unquote, police ourselves. And I just also think that's part of this dialogue, is that moving forward, improving our profession is also acknowledging that, yeah, I mean, people have been subjected to racism, and I'm not trying to make it broad strokes. I don't think that systemic racism. I don't believe that, quite frankly, not from my purview. But I do believe that in the past, and people have been treated unfairly. I've spoken to defendants when I've contacted them, and one case in particular, this guy I pulled him over for something very minor, and he went off on me, Eric, like he was calling me everything, in the book, and I wasn't even going to give him a ticket,
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to talk to the guy, and he wasn't from, he wasn't from Vegas, he was from California, and I said, I went back to the car, I ran him, nothing, just some issues in the past, but nothing too crazy, no warrants. I went back to him. I said, hey, let me ask you something, right? You don't know me. I don't know you, but you went off on me, and you called me a lot of stuff that I'm not. Why'd you do that? And he said, I'm trying to have like a legit conversation, but again, I do have a gift of gab. Okay, I come off kind of disarming. This guy was, just like I'm talking to you. I said, hey, why'd you do that? And he said, because I had some really, bad experience with law enforcement in California. I said, okay, well, what do you mean by that? Like, what kind of bad experiences? And he started telling me a few stories. And I said to him, and I meant every word of it, I said, sir, if what you're telling me is true, I would hate cops too. And I mean that. Now, Eric, did I know it was true? I wasn't there. Okay,
yeah, is it one? Never know. Yeah, absolutely.
You never know. Mm-hmm. But from his point of view, I meant it. If you're what you're telling me is true, if I was treated like you were treated,
mm-hmm.
I would hate cops too. And the point is, I think that it's people have their own worlds. They live in their own worlds. And, it's good to have some, it was empathy. It wasn't sympathy. It was empathy. I was trying to see the world through his eyes. And, he didn't get a ticket because I appreciated him actually, quite frankly, telling me why he went off on me. But when he left there, I thought to myself, that small encounter, it's going to improve the situation a little bit.
Yeah,
he's probably not going to be, he's not going to be giving fist bumps the next cop he sees. But he may change his tune a tad, realizing that not all cops, most 99% of cops are like me. They just want to do a good job and so forth. So that's part of officer wellness too, though, right? Because that was a good interaction.
Yeah. How are you carrying it? What angst, what pressure are you carrying? I love that example because I love the theme in general, right? And there's an aspect where I think that if people are honest with themselves, most people listening, I'd venture to guess, would not have felt any kind of flare of emotion through what you just told. But some people may, because I remember a time in my career where if I heard this former cop, now attorney, legal trainer, right, talking to this other, this brass admin cop, right, talking about, well, yeah, some people's experience might actually be really terrible with the police. Like, I'd be like, well, are we gonna indulge that? And I'm like, yeah, like why not? Like, let's not take a side. Let's just again, like, take a step back so we're not feeling emotional. If you feel something in you where something said made you really uncomfortable and then edge towards defensive posturing, like, my invitation is just kind of ask why not, or why is that? Like, where is that coming from? Because hopefully I don't lose people, but in that dynamic, the subject that was stopped felt a certain way, a biased way, based on his previous encounters with law enforcement, right? So he brought in some prejudicial thinking based on experience. Now, if you would have indulged and kind of walked right into that spider's web that he was presenting, being like, hey, you're a cop, so I'm going to treat you this way, and you're a cop that hates when people treat you that way, so you're going to treat me a certain way, you're only both going to further those perceptions and stereotypes, right?
Totally.
All the time I feel more and more as the years have gone by, but more and more I realize that regardless of how I feel about the situation, even if I'm just walking through the grocery store to get a snack and people are looking at me all kinds of ways, I try to just give like a pleasant kind of smile, a little bit of a smirk, so that I look more inviting, engaging, so I don't further their stereotype, whether or not it works, right? Because to your point, maybe that guy's not like, becoming he's not getting the, law enforcement memorial license plate after that stop. But,
right.
On one more practical version is he's telling, another story about how some racist cop pulled him over again. And his buddy's like, oh, yeah, did he write you up? Did he rough you up? He's like, well, no.
Yeah.
No, he actually gave me a warning. He wanted to talk to me about what I thought about things and why. Maybe the next
his friends
guy.
Are like,
he's like,
this guy.
I don't know. He sounded kind of cool. I want to get stopped by that cop. So anyway, guys, it's big picture, and we all have a hand in it that we can affect.
I just think, look, and I totally, I'm not, I love my profession. I love all these officers. And I just want to say that a lot of these people that are trying to agitate officers, I think this goes back to your mission here, wellness and health and physical and mental and in your spirit and so forth, is that, people have their experiences. I have mine, I have my prejudices, my biases, my stereotypes. And a lot of them are healthy, I mean, I prefer Honda cars. I prefer cars made by Honda. And I think that's for me, it works for me, right? I mean, and other people think Mercedes. And I'm just saying, like, just because those words don't mean bad things, but sometimes they do mean bad things, and people have their experiences. And I just, I want, like, I have this mantra, not only do I want cops to make good case law, but I have this mantra is like, do good, just like use good discretion. A lot of people do need to go to jail. A lot of people don't need to go to jail. Sometimes you resolve the issue with tickets and so forth, but do good. The next thing is just calm down. Eric, I got to tell you, like, that's the, when I watch videos of cops and they're just getting, they're just all hyped up, and oftentimes they make bad decisions, right? They're just not, they look at it, I hate when cops look out of control and so forth. And again, it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, I'm like, man, I wish I can tap that officer on the shoulder. And the last mantra is to slow down, right? A lot of bad outcomes occur because officers feel a need to rush an outcome, right? I'll give you, an example. Like, this guy was in a garage. He was in a detached garage of his ex-wife's house, getting some like tools, and they're not on good. I mean, they're on she allowed him to come over to grab his tools, but because they recently divorced, I guess. But he's drunk. He's causing a disturbance. He's probably slamming the stuff around. And then the officers show up to trespass this guy. And they go into the garage. Again, the garage is detached. There is no entrance into the house. Nobody's directly in danger. And they go in, and he goes in there and like picks up the hammer or something. He's like, "Get out! I'm not leaving without my tools." And the cops push in, and predictably he gets shot and killed. And it's like, the cops got qualified immunity. That I'm fine with that. That's what qualified immunity. It's a tough case, but that was that the optimal outcome. No, absolutely not. They should have, in my view, barricaded that guy. If they would have spent 6 hours negotiating with him, it would have been a lot better, cheaper, better for society, better for him, better for everybody. Even the ex-wife, better for her. She doesn't want to have the memory of her ex-husband being killed in her garage.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, that's what I'm kind of like also pushing. Like, that's part of making good case law is like, hey, look at the big picture thing. Caliber Press has this class, topic called lawful but avoidable.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of cops, man, it's a really good discussion because they just care about, hey, they just want us to focus on, can we do it, right? Can we shoot this guy, yes or no, right?
Mm-hmm.
But look at the precursors there. And so that's another thing about, just being mature and just thinking about, at the end of the day, that is really good policing when you just think about an optimal outcome, not just a lawful one.
Yeah, I love that. Let's pick at that a little bit because, again, speaking from my own experience, which is why people should recognize I'm not like pointing the finger. I'm welcoming in this conversation because for years, and I worked canine, right? So I worked high liability things. For years, I cited case law, and I hear younger officers doing it in a very similar fashion. Oftentimes, these are very hard charger officers.
Oh yeah,
very productive, very sharp, very they're great cops, right?
Yep.
I get worried and wary when I hear what kind of logic they're spitting, which is the kind of things I was saying, which was, Sarge, I understand. I'm within case law. I'm within case law. Case law supports my decision. This is backed by case law. And my thing after a number of years and becoming a sergeant like yourself was okay, it may be right now, but do you understand how this could be flirting closer to the line? And do we want to be within case law or do we want to avoid creating new bad case law, right? So I love how you keep bringing up like let's create good case law. Let's further good case law. But can you talk to us a little bit about how officers may internalize that in themselves, like look through this meaningful perspective and then potentially challenge some of their peers or walk them into their circle of recognizing, hey, risk reward is the juice worth the squeeze, and how do we avoid becoming the new case law or the new edition of Law Enforcement Digest up here in our city or state?
Yep. So here's actually number one is I want your audience to know, especially all of our officers, that there's nothing wrong with making case law. In fact, officers make case law all the time. They make good case law. If you just take a random, you're a Washingtonian, right? If you take I'm already going to hesitate saying this, but if you take 100 cases from the Washington Supreme Court that involve law enforcement, the vast majority support what the cops did. Mm-hmm. Man, I got to be careful with that because your state is very hard on your officers.
We're special. We're special.
You guys are very special, okay? But look, generally, like especially at the U.S. Supreme Court, right? So we're making good case law. The other thing is, out of 100 arrests, let's just take a random officer that works for you, okay? And you look at 100 of his cases, just random, just like arrests, citations. 100. I mean, the vast majority are good. They're not violating people's rights. They're not, getting these cases dismissed because they're completely inept. But a lot of officers don't look at it that way. They think, oh, case law means something bad, Okay, so now let's talk about how to make that good case law, which is, and what do I say to these hard chargers? Because I got to tell you, the hard charger is you got to be very careful with that officer because it's a blessing, but it can be a curse. The blessing, you want that hard charger work in your neighborhood at 1 o'clock in the morning. You absolutely want that. You do not want a retired on duty cop work in your neighborhood at 1 o'clock in the morning while you're asleep with your family. These hard chargers are a blessing. They work. They want to get bad guys off the street, which is great. But they do like to ride the line. Okay. So I have three frameworks for this, okay, that I teach in my class. Number one is articulation. The main thing is, look, there's a lot of things that we can do. The law is overwhelmingly in our favor for crime control, okay? um, it's a balance between crime control and freedom, right? Our country is not based on 100% crime control. That's not the only thing we care about.
Yeah.
If it was, then you'll be in my house right now seeing if these guns are federally compliant,
Yeah,
right?
that's a totalitarian state. We know what that looks like in the world, right?
We do not want that, and we hopefully that doesn't ever come to that, because I'm not going to live in a totalitarian state. So
yeah, agreed.
So cops need to appreciate that. That's what the Bill of Rights is for. We have, does the First Amendment hurt people's feelings? Absolutely. Does the Second Amendment cause harm? Absolutely. I mean, I love the Second Amendment, but let's be real. Guns, can be used maliciously, but of course they're also used more than not for good purposes. The point is articulation. Articulate why the cop needs to articulate why they are doing certain things. This is going to be the number one rule in making good case law. When officers are look, I'll just give you an example. There was a judge in Vegas, and and the cop did a pat down on this guy purely, in the report was because he had a violent criminal history. That's not enough, right? I mean, I like to say, if you're going to court and you're saying you're going to pat down for weapons, and the only reason you have is that they went to prison in the past, well, then I like to say, what, they can't find Jesus, right?
Yeah.
In other words, nobody can ever be a good person in your view if they went to prison. A lot of people leave prison and they change their life. They find religion, they find productivity, they find a job, they find a family, and and you're never going to see them again.
Yeah.
But then the court pushed back on him and basically said that maybe this is racial profiling, you're blah blah blah, but then you talk to the cop and you're like, hey man, did you have anything else going on besides, in that report was criminal history? Oh yeah, I mean, I had boom, this and this and this, and I say, well, why didn't you put that in there?
Yeah.
And they give all kinds of excuses. I didn't think it mattered. I thought I was okay, blah, blah, blah. So that's the first thing. So articulation. The second thing, and this is probably the biggest point for your hard chargers, is the more serious the crime, the more reasonable your actions are likely to be viewed by the courts. That is, look, there is a time to ride that line. There's a time to push things in the envelope. If you go up to a call for a domestic, and you can hear a female scream for help, please stop, he's killing me, or whatever, type of stuff. Put down the knife. Why are you doing this? Kick that door in. Yep. Take care of business. Mm-hmm. But if you're in a state where, you're going to your call for service because, a neighbor in an apartment is saying, oh, my neighbor's smoking marijuana. And, let's say it's a state where marijuana is still illegal. And you go there and you're like, boom, 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 police, and the guy's not answering the door. But you can hey, I know that guy's smoking a marijuana cigarette. Do not kick that door in. Okay? Do not kick that door in. If you end up popping that guy because he's smoking a joint and holding his gun at the same time, which might be kind of fun, and you end up popping him.
He's posting on TikTok, right?
He's posting on TikTok. He's of course, and you end up popping this guy because he has a gun in his hand. You are going to have a very bad day. You might even be charged with murder because maybe the courts don't like this stuff. But if you look through the window and you see a kilo of cocaine about to be flushed down the toilet, maybe that's when you kick the door in. You get my point. The point is that the law understands and recognizes that when you're dealing with serious things, you can push that line, and it's all about reasonableness, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last one is a lot of cops. This is again kind of goes to articulation, but they have a mentality of if it's possible, it's probable, right? They like they work in that zone, possibilities. Like sometimes you'll ask them, so why did you stop that guy? Oh, it was possible he was our suspect. It was possible he was this and that. Okay, well, we don't work in a world of possibilities. We work in a world of probabilities. Why do you think it's probable? Mm-hmm. And it goes back to articulation, but it's just that mentality and so forth. So I think that those three things are a good start for the officer to be like, hey, look, you're doing good work. Don't lose that energy. Keep pushing. Yeah. But articulate why you're doing things. Is this a serious crime? There was an instructor out there who kind of went down in flames, but he was teaching in his class. He was like, yeah, if you walk by somebody and they smell like marijuana, search them. And I'm like, I mean, do you want anything more than that? Because what if I go visit my mom and she's a marijuana
Right.
smoker
How many
for her
cops have smelled like
glaucoma?
marijuana, right? Because of who you
And
stopped and what
yeah,
apartment
and
you
I'm
were in.
wearing
Yeah.
you're wearing this jacket that soaks up smoke, burlap
Mhm.
or something, tweed, and you smell marijuana on me, and you're going to start searching me, right? Um, that's the stuff that we want to, kind of like, that's not good case law.
Yeah, yeah. No, those are great breakdown things that everyone can take away, and I love that aspect for like mentorship and guidance, right? For your first lines or for your corporals, field training officers, or just
Mm.
your veteran officers are just trying to help a buddy out. Whereas like in a very inviting way, you can literally say, "Hey, I saw your case," or like, "Hey, we're having a conversation about the stop. Like, can you tell me more?" Right? And
Yeah.
that's where you get into that articulation, where I can think of countless, right? Like as a sergeant, and then even some as a supervisor, like a command now, like looking at it at the next layer, it might be use
Hmm.
of force related, where I'm like, man, you went and did your paragraphs and all your articulation about the risks to you and why and what you saw and what you perceived and what was probable, right? So it's probable cause, not possible cause, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we kind of skimmed over like why you just blocked their egress with your car,
Right.
and you knew that they were not free to go. But like let's start at the beginning, right? Like why is that? And then the same thing as you, right? Like these
Mm.
cops know, they're just not taking the time to explain it all on paper, which you got to do, right? You got to show your work essentially, and that's
Why do
super
you think that
helpful.
is, though? What? Because I hear that all the time. The officers do have these facts. I see it all the time. But why do you think that the officers don't articulate this stuff?
Combination of things. I think one is a version of complacency, right? A lot of times it's not your early cops because they're learning, and they may over articulate certain things or
Hmm.
over detail at times to the detriment of their time management.
Right.
Writing every little detail, what the weather was like, when it has nothing to do with anything. Like that's
Right.
just learning. I think oftentimes it's trying to get to what they perceive as the meat and potatoes of what they think they might be hemmed up on or under scrutiny for, which is the use of force. So they will
Right.
do
Right.
paragraphs and paragraphs. However, they think pretty quickly, oh, yeah, Terry stop, easy, like
Right.
very low burden of proof. But you still got to break down what you have there, especially if it goes that way, because it's all connected, right? So if we're going to look at the use of force, considerations being like, what did you actually have in the stop? Like, what were you actually concerned about and why? Like, what evidence, physical, circumstantial, was leading you to
Right.
think that?
I think that's so true. And again, it's also the ignorance part is that they don't know what they don't know.
Mm.
I'll give you a great example. If you ask 100 cops, okay, let me ask you. I'm not trying to put you in the.
No, you're
So
good.
we have probable cause for an arrest, okay, and it's let's just make it a felony, okay,
Hmm.
and the guy is, he just, let's say his crime is strong arm robbery. Okay,
Sure.
no
Hmm.
gunplay. Just he physically took.
Yeah.
Okay, so we see him sitting on his porch, and he's just like he's on his rocking chair, and we don't have any exigency. We don't have an arrest warrant, but we do have probable cause for that guy right there sitting on his porch. Do you think the cop can go up there and say, "Hey, sir, you're under arrest for that strong arm robbery you committed last night"? And he's sitting on his porch at like 1:30 in the afternoon, right?
Yeah.
What do you think? You ask 100 cops, what are most going to say? Yes or no?
I think most would say yes.
You're
I'd
right.
be
And
curious, like, to get in the weeds. Like, what's that yard look like, right? Or do you
yeah,
have
it's curtilage.
fencing? Yeah,
Let's,
curtilage, exactly.
let's say that the porch is curtilage, and that is, for our viewers, that is the word curtilage is kind of, it's not
That's a
that
good.
conceptual. Like, what do you mean curtilage?
Yeah, yeah.
It's not the stuff in your nose, right? It's the area around the home that's protected, like the home itself. So the court would find that this is curtilage, porch, rocking chair. He's just kind
Mm.
of going back. You think about the South, he's just kind of
Yeah.
going back and forth. Now, but are we still allowed to do it with those facts? So we just go right up there and say, "Sir, you're under arrest." What do you think most cops will say?
I think most would say yeah.
Yeah, and they would be wrong
Hmm.
because they don't understand, or they're not appreciating that area, since it's like the home, which is what the Supreme Court has told us, that you cannot make a warrantless arrest just with PC. In fact, the rule has been around since 1984. And Washington will say you can't, intrude on a person's private affairs without the authority of law, right? Well, where is the authority of law? And the cops will say, well, I can see him. Well, plain view doesn't work because you still have to get onto the curtilage lawfully. Usually you go onto curtilage because of, consensual encounters. Hey, how you doing? Can I talk to you, Eric? You go on there because you have the authority, right? You have a warrant. some kind of exigency, help me, he's hurting me. But here we don't have any of that. We just have a cop who sees a guy that they're wanted, but where's the authority of law, whether it's in Washington or Texas, right? And that's the thing. Going back to the reason I bring this up is because that's why it's missing in the report.
Mm-hmm.
It's missing because the officer didn't think about it. He didn't think that he now if the guy struggles, he starts resisting, he starts pulling away. They'll do 3 paragraphs on a strong arm bar takedown, whatever you want to call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're not even going to talk once about why they even thought they had the authority to go onto that guy's curtilage and arrest him with no pleasantries. No, hey, how you doing? Can I talk to you? Something? Did you steal somebody's stuff last night? What the hell's going on there? And that's why that's what I'm trying to fix. I'm trying to increase so the officers actually know the rules here and can think about these issues so they make good case law.
Yeah.
And that improves their wellness.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fantastic. It's all tied together where the goal is really to make better cops, right? And that starts with the tangible things that we can control, like our actual health and mitigating stress. But then it all goes back into like, how do we do this job better? And that's exactly what we've been talking about. Man, Anthony, we could go on and on. I love all the tangible examples and the themes that you've introduced for us and the audience. Can you please share any closing notes and thoughts, and then also where people can find you, platforms, and then reach out to bring you out to their teams?
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, look, we do a lot of stuff for free. We are we're half nonprofit here, so
I feel you.
bluetogold.com, bluetogold.com. You can sign up for one of our training. We do advanced search and seizure training, interview and interrogation. That's our bread and butter. With the law. But we also have a free weekly webinar, usually on Wednesday nights, and they're on Zoom. You sign up, you don't pay a penny. You get a certificate for attending. They're usually about an hour long. We also take questions at the end. A lot of officers have questions, and any questions, a cop in New York will be like, hey, what about this? And a cop in California is, what about that?
Yeah.
And then also, even if you sign up and you can't attend because you can't be there at 6 p.m. Pacific, for example, you get a free copy of the video. You can download it, share it with your friends. But other thing we do, Eric, is the YouTube channel. I make a lot of YouTube videos. We have over 1,000 videos on YouTube. I make them every single week. And these YouTube videos are supposed to be short, sweet, to the point, and just answering these questions. I know this podcast it's a lot of different issues, because it's complicated, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But you got to, it's a conversation that has to keep going. If you're in law enforcement, you got to understand the rules so that you are making better decisions and you do have a better career and you have a better retirement. You're not facing any kind of legal problems. And that's what we're all about. So I appreciate your time, and you have a great podcast. I've seen it. I've heard it. So hopefully this contributes to your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt it has. Thanks so much, Anthony.
Thank you.
Hey, Grit Nation. I got a couple things I'm really excited to share with you. The first is that the free newsletter, is now live. All you got to do is go to bluegritwellness.com to subscribe. It is basically a summary of everything good and gritty for the week, including some exclusive content specifically on the newsletter. That'll include wellness information, nutrition, things that you ask, Q&A, as well as updates about Blue Grit, offerings, news, things that'll help you out. Next order of business. For years, I've been asked what kind of nutritional supplements I use because I've been into learning about health, nutrition, fitness for so long. And for years, I landed on NutriCost. And it's only a recent thing that I've been an affiliate, but now I get to pass the savings on to you. So if you go to NutriCost.com, use code BlueGrit, that's just BlueGrit, you get 10% off. Literally just a couple items, you get free shipping. And the reason why I found it was because it was always the best quality for the best value. So I always recommend people look at the ingredient list, look out for things like sucralose. It has the lowest amount of unnatural ingredients if you're looking for that kind of thing, whether it's your whey protein isolate, which I toggle on and off of, or organic vegan protein to cut down on different chemicals that I just generally like to avoid. It's not just protein, it's creatine and minerals, vitamins, things like L-theanine and magnesium, which I use regularly to help my nervous system power down. It aids rest and recovery, promoting better sleep. So whatever it is, go to NutriCost.com and you can just enter the code BlueGrit to get your 10% off. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.